So good afternoon, everybody who is listening to this on YouTube. I'm very sorry that I wasn't able to make this recording stream live on Facebook. I'll try to make sure that I get that fixed before I do this again. And this will just be the first of a number of recordings, a number of lectures, a number of talks that I intend to give about the history of Thai scripts to try and explain as much as possible how these scripts work. But before we begin with that, it's worth just having a look at the extent of script diversity in the world. Now, this map, which comes from a lovely book that I have enjoyed over many years, shows that most of the world are using the Latin alphabet, which is in that sort of green-gray color, and that there are two other very large parts of the world using other alphabets, the Cyrillic alphabet in a sort of mauve color, the Arabic writing system in the light green. But then as we move across to Asia, particularly South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia, we see lots of different colors that represent lots of different scripts. And in particular, you'll see that the country of India has a number of scripts on it, those sorts of orange colors that represent, so the Nagari script of Hindi is in the darker color, and all the other scripts related to it are in that lighter orange color. Okay, so what you can see is that Asia in generally, particularly Southeast Asia, South Asia, and East Asia, is the most diverse part of the world in terms of scripts. And we can also talk about scripts in terms of different types. And it's important to understand this because this affects the way in which we think about scripts and in which they get written and in which they get represented. So 6 different types of scripts have been mentioned. So there are alphabets, which are where symbols represent both consonants and vowels. So in English, the A vowel, A, and the E vowel, E, are written with very similar types of symbols to the consonants C, D, F, and so on. They're written as independent symbols. Then there are scripts like Arabic, where only consonants are represented and vowels are either not written at all or optional. So you can have an Arabic word which is written with the letters K, T, and B, and this can represent the word kitab, which means a book, which is an Arabic word that has been borrowed all over the world, but also kataba, which means, I think, something like he is writing or something like that, because the vowels are not written. And then there's the abugida. This is a term that's been created in recent years to refer to the kinds of scripts where you must write the vowels, but vowels are secondary. They're written above, below, on the right or the left, or even a combination of the same in connection with consonants. And these are the systems of writing that we see in India and in the areas influenced by India. So they're nowadays known as abugida. There are 3 other types of systems that we could talk about. The featural alphabet, that represents sounds iconically. That means that you can tell what the sound is going to be from the shape. This is the Hangul system in Korea. Syllabaries, where you write syllables, not single sounds. So you have ga, gi, ge, and go are all written separately. And what are known as logographic symbols or ideographs, which are where symbols represent a whole word. Okay, so they're the different types of scripts that we have in the world, and it's important to understand this so that we can make sure that we understand how the languages, how the scripts that we're talking about work. So there's great script diversity in South and East and Southeast Asia. The countries of Burma or Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand all have different official scripts. Every one of those countries has a different script. They're related, but they're different. In India, there are at least 11 official scripts, with several states such as Tamil Nadu Kerala and Orissa having their own official script. We know for Assam, of course, that it has its own script, which is very similar, but not exactly the same as the Bengali script or the Bangla script used in West Bengal. So they can be thought of as two very closely related scripts, but they're still different. And there's dozens of minority scripts. We don't know. I don't know how many minority scripts there are. And actually there are new scripts being created all the time, so this number will be increasing. But most of these scripts originate from the Brahmi script, developed in India before 3,000 years before the Common Era. So that's at least 2,300 years ago, and probably earlier. There is debate about exactly when it was developed. I'm not going to enter into that today, but if we're going to understand the Thai scripts, we need to spend a moment talking about the Brahmi scripts first. So the Brahmi Abugida is the ancestor of at least 40 scripts, and probably more, including Devanagari and Tibetan scripts used in India and around, and also of the scripts of mainland and insular Southeast Asia. That means the islands. So there were scripts that were used in Java, in what is now Indonesia. There were multiple, the Bali also, the Balinese script, still in use by some people. Multiple scripts on the island of Sulawesi. One of my colleagues here at La Trobe University has researched these. There were scripts in the Philippines. Most of these don't have a lot of use today, and they're associated with the spread of Hinduism and Buddhism. But unlike the Arabic script, which spread across Asia at a later period, these scripts tended to keep changing and adapting once they were brought to these new countries. So I've put here that it says the earliest known inscriptions in the Brahmi script are found in South India and Sri Lanka, dating before the 6th century BCE. I'm really not sure about this. It's not an area that I have expertise in. But these scripts may have developed from Aramaic, as Hebrew and Arabic did, but this is much debated. I don't want to talk about this too much, but I think it's useful for people to be aware that there is an argument about the origin of the Brahmi script. So it's around 2,300, 2,400, 2,500 years old, but already to the west, in the area that I now call the Middle East, in places like Palestine, Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, already then, many hundreds of years earlier, there were scripts that were developed and were probably known to people in India. Now, whether the Brahmi script was developed from that, was inspired by the fact that that existed, or was independently developed is not known. And there tends to be a view in India that the script was independently developed. There tends to be a view by Western scholars that it was influenced by these Semitic scripts developed in what is now the Middle East. I don't have an opinion on this. It could be either way. We'll probably never really understand what the story is. But the fact is the Brahmi script was developed. Here's a small fraction of the Emperor Ashoka's 6th pillar edict. Somewhere in my library here, there's a wonderful old book about Ashoka's edicts, and I wish I could find it, but it hasn't emerged from all the bookshelves here for quite some time, and it contains transcriptions of all the texts of this. But let's have a little bit of a look at how this alphabet works. So you can see already how similar it is to many of the alphabets that many of you know. You have ga, ka, ga, ga, nga. And then the next line, ja, cha, ja, jaha, nya. And the Mordonya series with the little dots written underneath them, da, ka, da, da, na. These sounds are no longer found in Assamese, but they're still written in Hindi. And in fact, you can see that this alphabet is pretty much exactly the same as the modern Nagari alphabet used for Hindi, not in terms of the shapes of the characters, that's changed over the years, but in terms of the number of the letters present and the order in which they are expressed. And this order is an order that we still find in many of the Thai languages today. So to understand the history of the Thai scripts, we need to understand the story about these. And the other important feature of this script is that all the consonants have an inherent short sound attached to them. So they are not just simply the sound g, k, they are in fact ga, ka, ga, etc. Now these in Eastern India change to be pronounced as go, ko, ngo, or go, ko, go, ho, ngo, which is the way that Assamese pronounce them today. But historically, it was probably more like a gut sound, which is what we still have in Thai. And here's another important innovation in this script that was applied to the Thai languages. So because the consonants have an inherent sound, this to write other vowels, you have to attach symbols to the consonants. And the symbols that they attached were these. And notice that the E vowel is written above the consonant. The U vowel is written below the consonant. The E vowel is written to the left-hand side of the consonant. And the O vowel is written on both sides. And this is exactly what Thai languages still do. So this is what the Asokan Brahmi looked like for ka, ki, ku, ke, ko. This is very different from the way these things look today, either in Assamese script or in the Nagari script used for Hindi or in any of the Thai scripts. But the principle that you put the E vowel above, the U vowel below, and the E vowel to the left and the O vowel on both sides, this still applies. And also the fact that you have a long E written with I with a bar on top of it on the second line, and a long U, which is U with a bar, that are written with a doubled symbol. And we still have that to some extent in the modern Thai scripts. So here is a list of some of the scripts that have developed from the Asokan Brahmi. And we have here just the ga, ka, ga, ga, and nga symbols in all of these different scripts. And they are from the left-hand side. There's Devanagari, used for Hindi today, but also for Marathi and other languages. Gujarati, the Punjabi, which is developed more recently. What says BEN here, which is Bengali, but of course, as we know, this is also Assamese. Oriya, Tibetan, TIB, is developed from this. And then the four Dravidian languages, Telugu, Kannada, Tamil, and Malayalam. Sinhalese, which is the language of Sri Lanka. And then in Southeast Asia, Burmese, Lao, Thai, Khmer. And you can see, perhaps just looking at the Lao, Thai, and Khmer, you can see the similarities between those letters across particularly the ga and the ka and the ga, which is now pronounced ka in most of those places. You can see that similarity across them. And then finally, the island scripts, Javanese, Balinese, Tagalog, which is used in the Philippines. And the last two, I'm afraid I don't even know what they are, but these are island scripts. And this is not all of them. This is just some that have all come from the Asokan Brahmi. And this table is, I think, quite interesting. So if we take the letter ta, which is to tau in Thai script, you can see what this letter looked like in the ancient Indian Pallava. So what happened was that the script was taken by some South Indian writers and adapted for their language, which is an unrelated language to the language of North India, where this script originated from. And then the script spread across the whole of Asia and gradually changed to develop the scripts that are at the bottom of this page. I think there's probably better charts of this available today. This is an old one that I got out of a book some 20 years ago. But the point is that the scripts have been developing. Now, so the first take-home message, this is something that I have learned from various lectures over the year. Tell the people who are listening what it is that you would like them to remember. So, point number one, the history of scripts is different from the history of languages. So the way we write languages is not the same as the way we speak them. So we can say that all the Thai scripts are relatable to this Brahmi script, but the Thai languages are not relatable to the language for which was used for the Brahmi script, a form of Sanskrit. That was an Indo-European language, not the Thai languages do not descend from that language, but the Thai scripts descend from that script. So Brahmi was created to write a form of Sanskrit. It's not exactly the same as the classic Sanskrit or the Vedic Sanskrit of the Vedas or the classic Sanskrit of the Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita and such texts. Similar, but not exactly the same. Brahmi was created to write that form of Sanskrit, but it was adopted by other languages from other language families, and it spread into Southeast Asia via the Pallava script. This is used for Dravidian languages. And then from there to Old Mon, which was one of the most important languages in Southeast Asia at the time. That's a Mon Khmer language. Its closest relative in India would be Khasi. Very different style of language. From the Mon Khmer language, it spread into the Burmese area and formed the Burmese script, and also spread to the Shans and formed the Shan scripts, and then from there, right? So that the script has been adopted by multiple languages that are not related to the language for which the script was originally created. If we just go back very briefly to have a look at the Brahmi vowels, for example, there's a separate symbol for each vowel. There's no problem in distinguishing the different sounds in this language, in this form of Sanskrit, using this script. But this isn't the case in the languages that adopted the script. Okay, so what are some of the things that then become a challenge? So Sanskrit has retroflex consonants. This is the Murdonya series, as it's called in Assamese. But these sounds are not present in Thai languages. But they are still present in some of the Thai scripts, particularly the script in Thailand. Sanskrit has 5 vowels, a, I, U, E, O, with long and short distinctions. But Thai languages are very different. They have no retroflex consonants, and yet some of them have symbols for those. They usually have 9 vowels. So they have, for example, U and something like, we have a word like Sung, which means a country, and Mung, which also means a country. So Sung and Mung. These are 2 different sounds that Sanskrit did not have. And so a way had to be found of writing these, which was not actually very adequate. And the other thing is that the Thai languages have tones. So in Thai Pake, for example, you have na, to quarrel, na, a paddy field, na, face, na, mother's younger sister, na, which means to melt away, and na, which means thick. But these are not written differently. So another important message to take home, which I haven't written here, is that most languages in the world are written with scripts that were created for another very different language. This is why English is so difficult to spell, because it's using the script created for Latin, which has different number of consonants and different number of vowels. Okay, so let's move to the Thai scripts. There are so many of these. There are scripts of Thailand, Standard Thai, but also Northern Thai or Lanna, which is a very different system. There are the scripts in Laos, Standard Lao, which is different from both Northern Thai and Lanna, and Lao Tam, which is a bit like Lanna, but still very different. Then there's the kun and the Tai Lu. And then there's the Tai Ahom and the Tai Nua, or the Dehong scripts. They are quite similar. And then there's the various types of Shan scripts, standard Shan, and then what we might call the Toliktai, the Kamti, Pake, Aiton, Kamyang, used also for the in the Trung manuscripts by the Tai Lang in Myanmar and various other groups. And they're all a little bit different from each other. It is a very interesting topic, this one. So the Thai script is usually dated to the time of King Ramkhamhaeng, 1279. I think that should say to 1298, not 1278. He was certainly, that cannot be his dates, because that would be going backwards. So the shapes of the letters are certainly influenced by Old Khmer. That's the old script of what is now Cambodia, which is itself derived from the Old Mon, which is itself derived from the Pallava scripts of South India, which are themselves derived from the Brahmi script, as I mentioned before. The Ramkhamhaeng script, however, has certain very important innovations, and one of them is the marking of tones. Now, this is a complicated topic and not one that I can go into in great detail. And the Ramkhamhaeng, I'll just go back to that photo again. There is some controversy about this particular stone here, which was written in the time of King Ramkhamhaeng. Some scholars have suggested that, maybe it wasn't written at that time, that it's much later. But let's say for the moment that we accept that it was written at that time. Certainly, there were inscriptions in Thai languages that looked very similar to this from about that time. And these have slowly, over many years, developed into the modern Thai script. Now, if we look at for those of you who know Thai languages, the Thai languages of Northeast India, for those of you who know Tai Ahom or Tai Aiton or Tai Pake, Kamyang, you will immediately realize that there's a lot more consonant symbols here than there are in those scripts. Now, this is something which I hope I will be able to explain in the next 10 minutes or so, why there are more. And there are in fact 44 consonants in the modern Thai alphabet. And if we read them across the top line, we have go, ko, 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 ngo, and then the last one on that line is jaw, jang, we call that, and then chaw, and then chaw, saw, chaw, nyo, and then that one's do, to, etc. These are there are multiple consonants that have the same sound. Now, you might be asking, why is that the case? Because in Ahom, for example, or in the scripts used for Aiton, Pake, Kamti, etc., you just have one ka sound, just one ka. You have ka, ka, nga. But in the Thai script, you have multiple sounds. So I'm just going to read through the first few in this. So the first one we have is ko kai. This is ko, chicken ko. It has the sound ka and ko kai. It is used for the word chicken. Then we have ko kai. This is used for the word egg, which is pronounced kai with a low tone. And we also have ko kwat, meaning kwat means a bottle. And we have ko kwai. Kwai means a water buffalo. We have ko kon. Kon means a person. And we have ko rakang, which means a bell. Now, those of you who've been listening will notice that there are 5 different ka in this. So there is ko kai, ko kwat, ko kwai, ko kon, and ko rakang. There are 5 different ko sounds. The first 2 are pronounced with a rising tone, ko. The last 3, ko, 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 are pronounced with a mid-tone. And then to finish off that group, you have ngongu, which is the snake, ngo. Now, why is this the case? Why are there so many cut sounds? Well, and there are multiple other sounds as well, and I haven't time to go through all of them. But the reason why there are so many core sounds is that the Thai writing system was created to do two things. It was created to write all the sounds of Sanskrit, and it was created to write all other sounds in the Thai language that Sanskrit did not have. So the original Thai sound, the original Thai language had a ka sound. This is the very bottom line where it says historical Thai sounds. It had a ka, ka, and then kha. That's what that X stands for, kha, and then ga, and then ra. This one that looks like a funny little Y is ra. And these were all sounds in the ancient Thai language, ga, ka, kha, ga, and ra. And then there is this one which is written with GH, which is a sound that I can't pronounce very well, but this is the ka, which is the sound that you have in the word kor, the word for house, but I don't pronounce this very well. And this sound was put into this letter was put into the Thai alphabet so that Sanskrit words could be written, or Pali words could be written for Buddhist and Hindu religious purposes. And then we have nga, which is ngongu. It's called ngongu by the Thais, but this symbol is nga. So, but over time, the sound produced by most of these consonants has changed. So the first one, ka, is still ka, and the last one, nga, is still nga, but all the others have become ka. The first one was always ka, but kha, the X has become ka, ga, the G has become ka, ra, this one that looks like a funny Y has become ka, and ga has also become ka. Well, this is very strange and difficult to deal with. Okay, this change, incidentally, the change that turns G into k is called a voicing shift, the East Asian voicing shift. And this has happened across many, many languages. And this, I don't know of any Thai languages where G is still present. G has changed either to ka, as it has in Bangkok Thai, or to ka, as it has in the Thai languages of Northeast India. So the word kon, which means person, is pronounced with a k in Bangkok, but is pronounced as kun or kon in Northeast India with a k sound. This is what is called the voicing shift. And this voicing shift leads to something that we call the tonal splits. Now, this is really complicated and is difficult to explain in the time that I have available because I need to finish soonish today, but I'm going to come back and try and talk to you again about this, but I'll at least try and explain one basis to it. So within the Thai alphabet, all these letters are classified according to 3 different consonant classes. And the consonant classes are shown on the right-hand side of this document, which comes from Wikipedia, in color. So we have what's called high class, mid class, and low class. So the first consonant, gokai, the chicken, this go, is what's called a mid-class consonant. The second one, ko kai, is a high-class consonant. Ko kuet is also a high-class consonant. And then ko kwai, buffalo, ko kon, person, ko rekang, bell, and ngongu, snake. These are all what are called low-class consonants. So the Thais have a system of referring to their letters by names, because as you can see, if you look at the column that is headed RTGS, and I think this is the Royal Thai something, their system of writing these, there are 5 different ko. I already mentioned that. So to distinguish them, we can't just talk about ko on a rising tone because there's 2 of those, ko kai and ko kuat. And we can't just talk about ko on a mid-tone because there's 3 of those, ko kwai, buffalo, ko kon, person, and ko rekang, a bell. We can't just talk about ko and ko we have to give them names. So this is what the Thais have done. Every single letter has a name. Now, this is the part that's a bit tricky, and I'm going to need to talk about this again, I know, but I'm just going to introduce the idea today. In Bangkok Thai, the way that you find out what tone to pronounce the word is to combine the tone mark or lack of a tone mark with the class of consonant that the first letter is. So when you have a high class consonant with a vowel and the first tone category, which is unmarked, you get a rising tone like kaw. That's the name of the letter. But an example of a word that fits into this category would be something like, let me see, ma, a dog. That's on a rising tone, ma. Whereas a low class consonant followed by a vowel followed by the unmarked tone will have a mid-tone. And an example of this would be the word ma, which means to come. So ma, dog, ma, come. Ma, ma, the dog is coming. Now in Northeast India, of course, that Tai Pake, for example, will say ma, ma, because the word for come is pronounced ma. Because in Tai Pake, the equivalent word to anything that in Bangkok Thai is a low-class consonant followed by a vowel followed by the unmarked tone is pronounced in Tai Pake with a falling tone as ma. So ma in Bangkok becomes ma. Na, paddy field becomes na, etc. Now this I know is tricky to understand, but it's kind of important. I'm going to come back to that because I don't want to talk for too much longer. I do want to mention, however, that the Thai vowels work in exactly the same way as the Brahmi system and as the systems that you're accustomed to. You write the long R after the vowel. You write E above. You write U below. You write E in front. And you even have combinations like ia, which are written with something to the left, above, and to the right. But this idea that R is to the right, E is above, U is below, and E is to the left, this is exactly something that we also see in all of the Thai languages that we are talking about, that we have in Northeast India today. Now, this is a Thai tone chart. I think this is too complicated to talk about today, except that if we just look at the column that is headed none, and we look at what are called alive tones, these are words ending in a vowel. When you have a high class consonant with a live tone, you get a rise, as in ma, a dog. When you have a low class consonant with a live tone, you get mid, as in ma, coming, to come. Now in Bangkok Thai, they write the word for dog with different initial consonant. They actually use 2 letters from the way they write the word for come. I think I'll come back and talk about this another day. It's a very interesting topic. Now, I've half explained how you work out the tones when you have a high class consonant, a live ending and no tone mark, and a high class consonant live ending and a low class consonant live ending. But that's only 2 of the possible different positions that you can have in Thai language. There's an awful lot of complexity in tones. And one of the reasons why this is important is that many people are considering how to write tones for the Thai languages of Northeast India, whether it is the spoken languages like Pake and Aituan, or whether it is for the reviving Tai Ahom language. But those languages have different systems. So here's a second take-home message. The Thai scripts of Shan, before it was reformed in the 1950s, and Northeast India still today, are different from Bangkok Thai script in several ways. They do not distinguish the original voicing distinctions. So what do I mean by this? Going back to this chart here, you do not have a distinction between the ka, which was originally ka, and the ka, which was originally ga, or the ka, which was originally ra. You do not write those differently. They are written differently in Bangkok Thai, which probably means that Bangkok Thai writing system was developed before the change in the pronunciation of these letters. Okay, whereas the Shan and Northeast Indian scripts were probably developed after the voicing shifts, somewhere around about 700 years ago. And of course, these scripts did not traditionally mark tones, whereas the Bangkok Thai script does and has for a long time. But it doesn't mark tones. It doesn't mark the tones as they are pronounced. You have a series of rules to work them out. I want to mention in passing that there is a manuscript which was written by the Chinese and printed into a book around 650 years ago. Oh, yes, about that. At the very beginning of the Ming dynasty, which was founded in 1368. And this manuscript, the Bai Yi Guan Yi Yu, has writing which looks very similar to the Tai Ahom. But it has exactly the same number of consonants as Tai Ahom. I will tell more about this in a week or two. And therefore, it has been created after this merging of consonants, this merging of sounds. This, as many of you know, is the list of Tai Ahom consonants. You can already see there are 17 there. And even though the Tai Ahom alphabet has ways of writing a couple of other letters for borrowed words, like da and ba and so on, it still has nowhere near as many symbols as the Bangkok Thai script. In fact, about half. And this is because it does not preserve the historical sounds that were preserved in Bangkok Thai writing. It's a little bit like in English, we still write the letter GH in a word like night, and we actually write, and that meaning of knight, which was of a soldier who rides on horseback, K-N-I-G-H-T, was originally pronounced something like knicht, and the ch was written by G-H, but we don't say this anymore, but we still write it. Well, Bangkok Thai is like that. It writes sounds that are no longer said, but the Thai languages of Northeast India do not. They write the sounds as they are pronounced, more like today. You all know what an Ahom manuscript looks like. I'm going to skip through this a little bit. It has many few symbols and no tone marks. That makes it very difficult to interpret because you can have a word like gong, which might also be pronounced guang, which can mean all of these things. All of these meanings have been found in some place or another. Some of them are listed in the dictionary produced by G.C. Borua 100 years ago. Many of them are found in Bor Omra or different other manuscripts. But these words would not have been pronounced in the same way. In Bangkok Thai, if they were pronounced differently, they were written differently. But in Ahom, pronounced differently with different tones and maybe even different vowels, they're still written the same. Okay. This creates a lot of issues for translating Ahom, which I haven't time to talk about today. And I'm going to continue this, well, let's see, maybe next week, and hopefully organize so that I can put this directly onto Facebook by next week. Anyway, I see that there are 6 people here. What I'm going to do now is stop the recording.